Hey Vsauce, Michael here, and today I've got a game theory for you. Have you ever thought that maybe Sans and Ness are the same character? Nah, it's too crazy. What is going on, guys? So today we're back with another deep dive, and today we're actually going to be going over one of the hot commodities inside of the Sinister Cup. Depending on what variant you have of this Pokemon, you may be really happy with it, or you may be, I don't know. There seems to be a lot of debate on which variant of this Pokemon seems to be the best, and I do have a couple of numbers that could point you in more of a general direction on which one possibly you should use versus the other, but ultimately I do feel like it's going to come down to a little bit of play style, play preference, and honestly availability, because it's not like this is going to be one of those Pokemon that you can just go out there and obtain, because it is a legacy move. Let's actually go ahead and get into Poliwrath today, who is a water and fighting type Pokemon, maxing out at 2586. One of the better Pokemon suited for the Ultra League, I do have to say so myself, but with a 0-1 attack, 14 defense, 15 stamina at level 22, you can hit that clean 1498, which does keep you underneath that 1500 CP cap. Now, according to my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I have, 30th in bulk and 28th in stat product according to all of the participants available inside of the Sinister Cup, which isn't that bad. I mean, that's actually really good on top of most of the things there. And of course, all of this does come from our base stats here with a 182 on attack, 184 on defense, and 207 in stamina. So that is actually one of the better spreads that we can get, with our defense just a tiny bit higher than our attack, but our stamina actually our highest stat makes, just for a really good PvP centric Pokemon, because our stats are spread out more on the bulk side rather than the attack side. So pretty sweet. Now, the thing that is making a lot of waves, pun intended, with Poliwrath are going to be the moves, specifically the fast moves here. We do actually have 3. I decided to omit some of the moves that we do have available here because they're just not really, there's not really hitting on a whole lot. There's no point in really talking too much about them because we kind of have clearer options on different ways to take them. So Rock Smash, for instance, is the only fast move that we're not going to really talk about today. I will mention that it's a 2 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn. After stab, it does get bumped up to 3.6, and it's just not nearly as good as either Bubble or Mudshot. Both of these moves outclass it in many ways, and it just makes it a whole lot easier of a pick than going for Rock Smash. Now, in terms of the charge move area, we do have Submission, which I'm not going to talk about today, and then we have those other moves, Frustration and Return, I think is what those are called, from the whole Shadow Pokemon mechanic here. And in the Sinister Cup, they don't really have a huge place. I mean, if you had them, okay, but it's not like they're really going to do a whole lot. They just, especially up against the ghosts and things like that, it's just going to really, it's going to be more of a hindrance on you than it's going to help you. So I would try to avoid those for the Sinister Cup at least. So what that actually does leave us with is Bubble, Mudshot, Hydro Pump, Ice Punch, Dynamic Punch, and Power Up Punch. So Dynamic Punch just completely outclasses Submission. It's the exact same energy for a lot more damage, which just makes it a lot more efficient. Way better choice to go with there. Ice Punch, it's going to be one of those moves that helps you kind of get around some things in the cup. It lets you at least hit for neutral damage in some scenarios. It lets you hit for super effective in some scenarios. It just kind of depends on what you're going with. It's definitely going to be one of those that's maybe, but the big debate does seem to actually be between Bubble and Mudshot here. So I ran some numbers, and I'm going to throw them up behind me because I think this will be the best way to demonstrate this. We're going to go over some shielding scenarios between both Bubble and Mudshot. Before we do that though, let's get rid of all this for a second. We're actually going to talk about the energy and the damage per turn that we do get for both of these moves, because there is something to be said about these. So 3.67 energy per turn for 2.67 damage per turn on Bubble. Since we are a water type Pokemon, we do get Stab, which does bump it up to 3.2. Mudshot though, 4.5 energy per turn. Of course, Mudshot, the move we all know and love, is amazing in terms of energy, but it does lack in terms of damage. That's kind of its big downfall. And since we do not have the ground typing, we are fighting typing, we do not get any kind of stat bonus, so it does kind of hinder us a little bit further. If we did have stab, it wouldn't sting as much. It'd still sting though. So, do you want to go with something that doesn't give you nearly as much energy per turn, but rounds out with a decent damage per turn, or do you want to go full kamikaze, all energy, no damage, but at least you get to these moves just a tad bit faster? Okay, bring all that back. Bring this stuff back. So, what I'm going to show you are shielding scenarios. I ran them for both Bubble and for Mudshot, and I have them for the entire cup and against the meta. So first, let's actually go over the entire cup, and we're just gonna put Bubble and Mudshot side by side here. So Bubble in the 0 versus 0 is a 23.7, Mudshot is an 18.3, so we do have to give a point to Bubble there. In the 2 versus 0, we have a 78.5% for Bubble with only a 72 for Mudshot, so point for Bubble there. In the 0 versus 2, we actually have an 11.8 for Bubble and a 5.4 for Mudshot, so another point for Bubble there. And in the last, against the entire cup, we have the 2 versus 2, which is 53.8 for Bubble and a 44.1 for Mudshot. So Bubble actually ends up taking it in every single scenario in terms of win percentage. That's literally just what this is calculating. In terms of win percentage, Bubble takes it hands down every single scenario. Now let's actually move on to just up against the meta relevant Pokemon. So there are like, I believe it's 23 Pokemon on PvPoke in the actual meta list here. So in the 0 versus 0, we actually have a 16.7 with Bubble, which is a huge difference between the entire cup versus just the meta here. But we actually are tied with Mudshot, which actually still does pull out a 16.7 as well. Next we move into the 1 versus 0, because we're more likely to hit that 1 versus 0 in the actual like tournament scenarios, we're gonna focus more on that. So in the 1 versus 0, we actually end up with a 58.3 for Bubble, and with Mudshot, 41.7. Then we move on to the 0 versus 1, which is a 12.5 for both. So it is a tie here again. And then we do move on to our 1 versus 1, which is our last shield scenario, a 41.7 for Bubble, while only 16.7 here again for Mudshot. So, it actually looks like Bubble actually flat out wins in every single scenario except for 2. And in those 2 scenarios that we don't flat out win, we're only tied for the exact same win percentage as Mudshot. So just as kind of like a general overview, Bubble is gonna net you more wins than Mudshot is. As much as I love the kamikaze playstyle of rushing to those charge moves and just firing them off as quickly as possible, it's not the safer play here. If you're more of the risky type player, or if you have some other like team of 3 that's like set up to really carry Poliwrath with Mudshot all the way to the finish line and just power punch and ice punch and dynamic punch, and you know you got 12 moves to fire off, do that, because that actually sounds really fun. But if you are just kind of on the fence on which one you want to go with, I probably would try to push you towards the Bubble side. Only because it's going to be the safer option. It's going to be the more rounded option up against the entire cup and the entire meta. So you can't really go wrong when the numbers say that you're going to win more with Bubble. Of course, there are a few caveats to some shield scenarios and some matchups specifically where obviously it would be better to use Mudshot rather than Bubble and vice versa, but this is just an overview of the entire shield scenario situations and up against the entire cup in the meta. Got it? So for the purposes of this video, we are going to keep moving with Bubble. Since we do win more with Bubble, we're going to let Poliwrath shine here and go with our best case scenario. Now in terms of the charge moves, it's kind of awkward here again because Power Up Punch seems to be one of the bigger players here, but yeah, you see this right here? It got nerfed. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but like right after I posted that Mawile video, like literally within the hour that I posted it, Niantic just like took their fist and just punch me with it, and then they took an open hand and they just smacked me with it, and I was over it. I'm not gonna lie. I was just like, well, guess that's what I get. So anyways, Power Up Punch was nerfed all the way down to 20 damage, so it is a lot worse in terms of efficiency. You really only want to use it to basically power up your move. Now, in terms of that strategy, it actually would make more sense to me to go ahead and use Bubbles, since we are having a really big damage output versus Mudshot anyways. It seems pretty nice that we would pair Bubble with Power Up Punch, because that means that we're not trying to fill in a gap by using Power Up Punch. We're just powering up what we already have to a better level. Does that make sense? So it seems like Power Up Punch is actually a pretty good fit here. Then we go with Hydro Pump, Ice Punch, or Dynamic Punch. Well, I really think that this is just going to come down to what you already have on your team. If you already have a decent neutral damaging attack, Hydro Pump and Ice Punch would kind of like, depending on which situation you fall, if you want water damage on your team, maybe you go with Hydro Pump. If you want ice damage on your team, maybe you go with Ice Punch. But in general, if you already have some neutral coverage, either one is fine. But you may want to actually take a look at Dynamic Punch, because for only 50 energy you get 90 damage, which is pretty good. So I really think that between these three, it's going to come down to how you, yes you, like to play your Poliwrath. Since we're going with Bubble, we can't get to our charge moves nearly as fast as if we had Mudshot. So for me personally, I think Ice Punch and Power Up Punch probably feel the best to me. It gives me a little bit of neutral damage, gives me a little bit of buff here and there. So I feel like that would actually work out pretty well for me. But like I said, if you need more coverage against the steel types, if you need more neutral damage just as a general attacker, go with any of these. For the purpose of this video though, because I like Ice Punch and Power Up Punch so much, that's what we're actually going to go with. So there's cases to be made for every move. I'm not going to lie. There's cases to be made for all of them. But I'm going to continue on with Ice Punch and Power Up Punch. And by the way, that's exactly the moveset that I used for all those shield scenarios earlier, just in case you were wondering. So because there's so much going on right now with all of the new moves being introduced and all this stuff getting flipped and flopped around, there's a lot of like craziness going on here. So kind of like try to pay attention to which movesets that I mentioned, because I'm going to try to make it at least as much apparent as I can which exact variant of that Pokemon you're winning versus losing up against. So moving on to some matchups here, we actually do have, holy cow, up against the entire meta, we're actually going to figure out which ones we win against versus which one we lose against. Now, all these are considering a 1 versus 1 shield scenario with the exact moveset that we just talked about. So we actually have wins up against Bastiodon, Banette, Drifblim, Empoleon, Mawile, Steelix with Thunderfang, Dusclops, that's with Feint Attack, Haunter, and Alolan Marowak with both Hex and Fire Spin. So in terms of our losses here, we do have Medicham, Alolan, Raichu, Steelix, and Poliwrath with Bubble. All those are going to be ties. Okay, I do kind of count those as a theoretical loss, because I technically lost my Pokemon too, so it's technically a lose-lose situation for me. Then on to the straight-up losses, the ones that they're going to still be standing on. We do have Dusclops with Hex this time. Then we have Claydol, Probopass, Bronzong, Girafarig, Poliwrath with Mudshot actually does end up beating the Bubble variant, so there's another case for the Mudshot Poliwrath, if that's the one that you like. Then we do have Gallade, Cresselia, Lucario, and Gardevoir rounding out the bigger losses, which all those have some Psychic type moves in them anyway, so that kind of makes sense. So there's a ton of stuff kind of going all around, and most of the things that we lose hardcore up against are going to be the Psychic type Pokemon that have some kind of Psychic type moves to go at us, and we do really well in a lot of areas outside of that, which is actually really nice. Now if we break down the numbers even further and we look at individual typings inside of the meta, if we actually look at all of the ghost type Pokemon, we actually end up having a really nice time up against everything except for Dusclops with Hex. And Dusclops with Hex is kind of one of those weird situations, because Dusclops is being considered with both Hex and Feint Attack. Feint Attack is honestly going to be a really interesting move, but it's automatically going to be resisted into that fighting type matchup. So Poliwrath has kind of an interesting spot there because Dusclops is going to carry that ghost typing, but we're actually going to be using Bubble, and if we need to power it up we can, but we still have that Ice Punch to kind of like put in our back pocket and only whip out when we really need it. So the thing with Dusclops is it could go either way depending on what moveset you run into, so kind of an interesting one there. In terms of the steel types, we actually only end up losing to Probopass and Bronzong. So Probopass is going to be able to just blindly output tons of freaking damage. It's really weird that we still end up losing, but Power Up Punch being the obvious type advantage move in that situation, unfortunately got nerfed and does like hardly no damage, so we kind of have to rely on Bubble and Ice Punch, and Ice Punch really isn't going to do a whole lot in that scenario, so we kind of have to just rely on Bubble, and unfortunately our fighting typing doesn't resist any kind of the electric type damage, but our water type is going to take full-on super effective damage from the lightning, electric, whatever that yellow bolt typing is, and it's just going to be a bad day for us. So Probopass is actually going to get a pretty good heads up on us. Then in terms of Bronzong, it's just kind of got confusion. And as we have seen in past cups in Season 1, Bronzong just slaps, man. He just goes at it, and you just, I mean, what are you gonna do? Next, in terms of the fighting typings, we actually have pretty good chances here. The only two Pokemon that give us some problems are actually gonna be ourselves, but with the Mudshot variant, like I mentioned a little earlier, and then Gallade. So Gallade showing up here is pretty obvious because Gallade has access to some really nice Psychic type moves to begin with, plus it's actually gonna resist a ton of damage from us, especially when we try to use this Power Up Punch. That resistance with only 20 damage, it's probably going to feel like we tried to flick Gallade in the forehead, and it's just not going to do a whole lot. We do have to rely a lot on Bubble and Ice Punch in that scenario because we need a ton of neutral damage, but it's just not going to be enough because Gallade can actually just turn around, use those Psychic type moves, like I said, and slap us. And the Poliwrath with the Mudshot, like we talked about a little bit earlier, with Mudshot it can actually just get to all of these moves a lot faster. If you think about Mudshot into Power Up Punch, literally is going to be one of the fastest activations that you can have, I believe, in the entire cup at this point, which is just insane. And he's just going to be able to just tear through a lot. He's going to be able to use a couple of Power Up Punches and just keep on trucking. I mean, he's just going to whip out, whether it's Dynamic Punch, Hydro Pump, Ice Punch. He could even be using Submission. I hope not. Either way, the big case for the Mudshot Poliwrath is that it's going to win in the mirror like crazy. It does really well in the mirror, and I think that in the mirror it could be one of the better options if you were running the Mudshot variant. But you have to remember, is the one matchup versus the Poliwrath in the mirror worth all the other percentages that you're going to drop because you don't run Bubble? Just throwing that out there. Last but not least, in terms of the typings, we do have the Psychic typing, and I literally just wrote, bruh. The Psychic typing, of course, is going to be one of the hardest matchups to go up against because we do carry that fighting typing. A ton of these Pokemon, Lugia with Extrasensory, Gallade, Gardevoir with their Confusion, Mastery, and Charm, and all this kind of crazy stuff that's coming at us because we carry that fighting typing. They're literally just going to blow some hot air right on Poliwrath, and he's going to evaporate. That's a joke on his water typing. I don't think it really works, but either way, the Psychic type is a no-go. Try to avoid those at all cost, of course. Definitely want to steer clear of those. But that is actually going to be it for Poliwrath, guys. That is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I am trying to get on the roll in terms of doing several of these a week. I do have one more planned for this week, and then next week should actually start the full week of 3 per week. But yeah, so I'm working on it. As far as I know, I already have the next one planned out. Like I said, it's already decided, but I haven't started doing the research for it. So if you want to cast any kind of votes for the next deep dive, definitely jump down into the Discord. There's a channel called Deep Dive Votes. You just type !vote, type any Pokemon that's available in the Sinister Cup that you want to vote for. Your vote is cashed. You can only vote once per Pokemon though, and Yeah, that's it. And you can vote for every single Pokemon once, but you can only vote for one specific Pokemon one time. That seems way more confusing than it should be. You, as a person, can vote for as many Pokemon as you like, as long as you don't put in 2 votes for the same Pokemon. That sounds a lot better. Anyways, that's it. I'm done. Have a great weekend, because I think this is coming out towards the weekend. Anyways, okay, bye. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.